Michigan football in the news is very similar to Happy Days in a lot of ways. And I think that if you are an older person and knows anything about Happy Days, then you know exactly what I'm talking about, because it just kind of goes along. Everyone's enjoying the drama. And then at some point it jumps the shark. Fonzie jumps the shark. That's what essentially has happened. We're going to talk about the weekend's events on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Monday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. We are going to kind of be able to disambiguate a little bit more. That's going to probably be the goal and focus of a lot of things until we actually have a game to talk about, which will certainly happen when we start talking about the Purdue game. I don't know how much this week we're actually going to delve into what Purdue does or doesn't do. But certainly we are going to continue to get into the craziness that has been everything in the news, the political hit job that has essentially been going on. Yes, it is a political hit job. I know that there are a lot of Buckeye writers that don't want you to believe that, and they want to believe that you are coping and seething and all of these different things, when in fact it is them. So a lot has changed since we last spoke on Friday, right? So obviously we've gotten some disinformation. We've gotten some just full out fake news. We've gotten Michigan people pushing back, because one of the things that I've long been teasing, this was more informed info than it was inside info. And trust me, I have a whole Columbo style story that I could present to you in terms of who did what and why, based off of the actual intel that I have. But you've seen it kind of hit the airwaves here that the Ohio State is the suspected culprit when it comes to who hired the private investigative firm, which is something I've been trying to lead you to get to since really Thursday's episode, right? Once everything kind of got laid out. Now there's more layers to onion to peel off here. Certainly, there is some tantalizing intel, like Ryan Day's brother is a private investigator in New Hampshire. I don't think that he was probably that lazy. Is he involved? He might be involved, but I don't think the paper trail would be that easy to distinguish. Now, this is all above my own knowledge, right? This was because I have my knowledge that is dead set. It is lock solid of the kind of what happened and some inside info as far as that. But the stuff that obviously no one in the Michigan market, or I would say the majority in the national market, knows the exact truth, right? So they will get to that at some point, and we will continue to cover that part. But certainly that is one of the things that I've been teasing. I know everyone always is like, why don't you just say it? Because I can't just say it, right? There's reasons why I can't just say it. This was the road, the end result of the road of knowledge I was led down. Okay. But let's talk about some of the things that have been in the news since. Right now, it's very, very good that things have kind of turned. Right, it went from kind of the Michigan fan base really trying to grapple with the news and trying to figure out a lot of different things, and we've tried to be a little bit of a beacon of hope as we know the full breadth of what happened behind the scenes in Ann Arbor. So with that in mind, things have changed. Certainly the narrative isn't quite as rock solid. Will there be the two things that I've mentioned before are still out there? But what doesn't help the case, especially when you are in this political hit job, this, PSYOP, as Steve Deace calls it, there are things that make you take it a lot less seriously. And that's kind of what's come out from Thursday night forward, right? Because you had the person who actually was one of the people was out there, spoke to ESPN, was out there on the ground with the actually recording things. It was no new info whatsoever. You have the TCU thing, which we talked about on Friday as well. The TCU had, didn't Michigan didn't know TCU signs because they messed with them. I don't know that I believe that's fully true. I don't think that's how that game actually went down, right? But then you have the other things that happened, particularly on Sunday. Nothing happened on Saturday, but on Sunday, you had two things that were released. You had the Wall Street Journal saying that Jim Harbaugh's contract extension was rescinded, that he had an offer and that Michigan said no, right? And there has been pushback by John U. Bacon. There's been pushback by Sam Webb, Chris Ballas, all of these people saying that's not the case. And then Jim Harbaugh said that I don't believe that's accurate at the press conference. So that was one that didn't get to live for very long, a narrative that didn't get to live for very long, but certainly it's one that emboldened those who don't know any better, that are taking the news that's presented to them as fact without questioning it or anything. And then there is the most ridiculous story that I've heard that was so uncritically posted. And this entire thing, these things, right? Like having inaccurate info about Jim Harbaugh's contract. And then this thing that I'm about to mention to you by SI, these are things that completely undermine their entire whatever it is, right? Like you think you have serious information, blah, blah, blah. But then when you come out and you say things like this or you print things like this, it is just completely undermines what you're trying to sell to the general public here, okay? So this is from SI, Pat 40, kind of buried the lead. Maybe that's by design because he's sitting, it's the article says like, it's kind of embarrassing that Jim Harbaugh's not answering questions. Michigan's not answering questions, even though they can't answer questions about it, as many learned today. But we knew that was the case, right? We've been through all of this before. So he prints multiple sources from one Big Ten school told SI that a coach at a different school called them before playing Michigan to warn them about Wolverines ball boys on their sidelines, listening to plays and communicating information to the Michigan sideline, holding a football up in one hand to indicate an expected pass and in another hand to indicate a run, for instance. Parenthetical, sources at the school that was warned said they experienced nothing in the game to implicate the Michigan ball boys. So the first clue here to tell you what the narrative is. Now, yes, it's two different schools involved, but that doesn't necessarily make it true on one end, but multiple sources at one Big Ten school, multiple people. And then said that a coach at a different school told them. So I would venture to guess that one of those schools is the one that you would imagine is behind all of this. The multiple sources at one school talking to the media feels awfully fishy, right? It feels like they're, again, trying to create a narrative and, they're trying to make fetch happen and fetch isn't happening. I have another thing on this that I want to get to that just to kind of debunk how absolutely absurd it is. We're going to do that here in just a moment. Now, normally we would have your game changer of the week. Michigan didn't play, so we don't have that. But much like let's just say J.J. McCarthy, Athletic Brewing Company has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. Athletic Brewing Company has completely changed the game, like I said. Now they make non-alcoholic beers that taste amazing, but their brews are also award-winning. They beat out full-strength beers in global competitions. They're constantly releasing limited edition experimental styles to add to their variety, and they're fit for all times, which means you don't really have to worry about hangovers. You don't have to worry nearly as much as you do with other with alcoholic imbibements about the calories. And you know what? They're right there on your shelves. I saw some while grocery shopping yesterday, so you can go and pick it up at your store. But you can also find Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic brews online at a store near you. Go to whichever one you prefer, athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use the code LOCKEDON to get 15% off of your first online order. That's locked on at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Before we move on, passion, drive, and patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy And it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle as well as to level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only. Available to U.S. customers. All right, so as I said, there's when I read this quote on SI, I laughed, and I reached out to some people to just get their reaction. Right, again, people within the building, and they literally laughed. They were like, "This is absolutely absurd," and they said, "Do you know how much would have to go into all of this to make that happen?" And especially with ball boys who don't even know our own. Like, so it's just absolutely absurd. And it's one of those things where it completely undermines the general thesis of this entire, I'll go ahead and say it, witch hunt. Now, I don't think it's the same witch hunt as, like, say, Burgergate, right? Like, I think this is, certainly there could be an NCAA component. I'm kind of feeling, the more that kind of seems to come out about this, that it is more being driven by the investigative firm in the school who hired the investigative firm, if that is indeed Ohio State, which we hopefully will find out at some point. That will, whether it's them, whether it's someone else, I can't believe it's anyone else. But like, when you hear the news that they asked the NCAA about this exact thing that happens to be what Michigan is accused of, then that kind of tells you a lot of things. But I think on top of it, I think that it's funny just kind of seeing a lot of these online narratives, right? I haven't been online too much, really, in the last week plus. I mean, I've had my moments. I think it was Friday night that I kind of got a moment to be on Twitter for a while and just kind of scroll and do some stuff. I've been active here and there on the Wolverines message board on 3, which I've been posting a little bit in there, and to some degree leaving some breadcrumbs. But it's been funny to kind of watch a lot of these different things, and we're like, oh, cheating is the thing that gets brought up, right? And no one's really told me exactly the level of advantage that it gives, right? Like, is it against the rules? I mean, that's still negligible at this point. It still seems to be a gray area at this point. But no one's really told us, like, exactly how you get a decided gained advantage, right? There's people, national writers and such, that come out and say, hey, like, Michigan won all these games because of this, right? Because of the thing that they're being accused of right now. Listen, it's not that simple, right? Certainly, like I've talked about, I do not blame Ohio State for 2018 and 2019. I blame Michigan. And I've been pretty consistent going back to 2019 when I told you that Ohio State had Michigan signs. It was Michigan's fault. They knew Ohio State had their signs, at least at some point in 2018. There were a couple other teams that had those same signs, and it became evident, and they didn't change things up, and those games happened, right? So it's more incumbent upon Michigan to adapt, right? If another team knows how to exploit you in any way, shape, or form, you stop it. Sign stealing is illegal. What happened, the alleged illegal sign stealing, sending someone to games and video recording them, that is that doesn't necessarily mean that someone suddenly has a crazy advantage that they didn't necessarily have, right? You can go to games, as we've seen this weekend. You can go to a game and do this, and I mean, there's 100,000 people in a stadium. It's This wasn't a practice that was banned, like I said before, and understand we're debating now the spirit of the rule, but it wasn't banned because it gave you too much of an advantage. I understand if Michigan's found to be culpable in this and they say there was no gray area, we're going to punish you, then fine. That's what is going to happen. That's what needs to happen. But there's so much screeching and pearl clutching out there as if it gives like this decided advantage that is just beyond merit. Now, on top of this, I don't know if Michigan had scouted any of the 3 non-conference opponents. I would guess no. And that is if Connor Salian sent anyone to games. I don't know, but I would guess no. Then you had Rutgers who huddled. You had Nebraska who huddled. You had Minnesota who huddled. You had Indiana, who had a brand new offensive coordinator. And then you had Michigan State, who sent their quarterback to the sidelines and then huddled. So tell me how much this year that's really played a big difference, at least from a defensive against the offensive standpoint. Right? Like, and it's not like Michigan's offense has been very good, but it hasn't been like they haven't had to earn everything that's been given to them, right? They have. They've just made plays. So there's a lot of people out there screeching about a bunch of things of which they know nothing about. Well, there have been a lot of people who have outed themselves as non-knowers of ball. And I have been more shocked, I think, at just the amount of just people all the way across the board, from local to national. I'll even go in with some regional, of course, that just clearly don't know what they're talking about. The Pat 40 should have gotten that quote and said, I'm not going to print this. This is absurd. And yet he did. And then you have, these are more message board poster types sitting there trying to say, Jim Harbaugh scrubbed his Twitter account going back to 2020. Get him. What is he hiding? But he hasn't tweeted since 2020. So what are you getting at here? Like, no one can produce a single tweet that he had tweeted that is gone. I understand these are rival people, but like they're so worked up. You see them rooting for Pete Thamel. They want that, and then they thought that Jim Harbaugh was going to resign because they're sitting there saying there's an emergency regents meeting, and it was just a plain old meeting that happened in the morning. They're like, tonight there's an emergency regents meeting, and this is the beginning of the end of Jim Harbaugh. But it wasn't. And then they are sitting there saying, press conference Monday, he's going to resign. But he didn't. When he signs his contract extension, what are you, all of you people who are out there just clutching those pearls so hard that your hands are bleeding, what are you going to do then? Right? And again, I urge you, your glass house is very fragile. Stop throwing stones at it. Because the truth is out there. It's continuing to emerge. I know you think it's all crazy message board fodder. I've seen message board genius putting out screenshots of stuff that I actually know to be true. Whether it's the full inside info or I have enough info to infer that thing that they posted that on the message board that is being ridiculed online actually happens to be true. So keep following along with this. I know you won't stop, but we're just kind of along for the ride now. There's really no new info that I gleaned over the weekend, but it's just the only thing I gleaned is there are a lot of insane people out there at the moment. So it's been fun to pay attention to. We're going to continue on that train of thought here, and we're going to continue on in just a moment. Before we do, it is NFL Monday. By the time this is up, the Lions will be playing. I will be sitting in front of my couch, or laying in front of my couch with the computer on my lap, watching. But what's a way that I could have a little bit more fun other than just watching the Lions and working, all of that stuff? PrizePicks would be the way. PrizePicks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you versus the numbers, which is amazing because instead of battling thousands of other players like you do on other platforms, which also includes pros and sharks, people who have a lot more ins other than us casuals. You pick more than or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projection, and you just watch the winnings roll in. Testing my skills on PrizePicks this football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Now, if you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. PrizePicks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. And with quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and enormous selection of players and stat types, that's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use the code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege with the promo code LockedOnCollege and get a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, we're not going to continue this for too long here. I'm a little under the weather, to be honest, and I very much just want to go back and lay down. So, it's getting a little bit of the dizzies at the moment. But anyway, this has just been a very fascinating weekend, and I hope that if you're a Michigan fan, you come away emboldened because the tide is turning on all of this. Again, those two things that I mentioned before are still out there. It's 7:28 in the PM at the moment, and I would have expected I said to some colleagues, I said if they're going to drop one or the two of those, they're going to do it before Jim Harbaugh's press conference, or they'll do it in their normal 7-ish time frame, right? So that seems to be gone now. I think I meant to mention this on the last podcast, and I hate to bury the lead by putting it late in here, but we talked about the Ohio State practice film rumor, which is how all of this started for me. That was the rumor I heard, like I said to you before, back in I guess that would have been October. No, it would have been September. It was back in September, mid-September. And that's what kind of started me down this path, right? I've been assured multiple times by sources that does not happen, that Michigan does not have Ohio State practice film, has not shown Ohio State practice film, not in their possession, there was no wiggle room, right? It wasn't like any kind of semantics here. It was like, well, whatever. It was categorically rejected. Do I believe that Ohio State believes that Michigan has Ohio State practice film? I do believe that Ohio State believes that. That doesn't mean anything, but I do believe that that's the case. But I do think that there's a lot of interesting things that have come out of all of this. And just to continue on with the rival stuff, do note that Ryan Day, out of his last 5 losses, has publicly complained about other teams sign stealing two of the times, Clemson and Georgia. I don't believe Georgia actually steals signs from some conversations that I've had, but there you go. Clemson, when Brent Venables was there, for sure did. But it's Ohio State's a voracious sign stealer themselves. We said that last week on Wednesday. We know that we've seen it happen 2018 and 2019. Obviously, Ryan Day is out there, seemingly, again, allegedly by me and by many of you, is essentially complaining about Michigan stealing signs in 2022 at the very least. Well, it's part of the game. Whose fault is it that you did not succeed in your game if you thought that people maybe had your signs? Have alternatives. Just be better. And that's all I can say for Michigan in 2018 and 2019. I'm not sitting there, and I've never sat there and said, oh, it's Ohio State's fault. No, Ohio State did what was within the rules. It's on Michigan to change, okay? So it is what it is. And we're just going to continue to get into this story. And I'll continue to try to find when I'm a little bit less under the weather to lead you down the lanes that you need to be led down to know exactly what's going on. But I think a lot of you now have seen with all the breadcrumbs that have been kind of given out. I think a lot of you are understanding where we're at in all of this. So we'll discuss it as it keeps evolving and changing, which I'm sure it will do over the entire week. That's going to do it for us today. We will be back to continue to discuss this saga tomorrow, Tuesday. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.